Ready now? Right. My name is David Riemann. I will be presenting Friedman Chapter 1. If you see something, say something for the pink team. The way that this chapter is set up, if you see something, say something, he goes through, Friedman goes through a narrative of describing what he sees as being a problem in America and what he's going to say about changing that. And so he does this by setting up an introduction that begins in China. He talks about American complacency. He talks about frustrated optimism, then goes back to China, and then he wraps it all up in a nice little bow and tells us what he thinks we should be doing to get back on track. So the very first line says, "This is a book about America that begins in China." One of the things that Friedman had done recently is that he had gone to a conference in Tianjin, China. In a space of 5 years, the way to get to Tianjin changed from having to fly into Beijing and take several buses, crowded, feeling very just dirty and polluted, to a high-speed rail that was able to go about 120 miles an hour. And what he noticed else about this conference in Tianjin was that they were having it in this massive, massive convention center that took the Chinese government 8 months to build. He thought that this was amazing. It was state-of-the-art, everything was brand new, it had been completed in such a short amount of time, and the place was amazing. And then he had to take a quick look at the fact that back in his home state, in Washington, D.C., in the Washington, D.C. Metro, there was one station that had 2 escalators of 21 steps each, and they had been broken down for the better part of a year. And when they finally got around to setting up a schedule to fix it, they said that it was going to take 2 months to fix these 2 escalators. So we had 2 months to fix 2 escalators of 21 steps each, and then China had been able to build a massive convention center, state-of-the-art, in 8 months with a lot of escalators, more than 21 steps. So going on to American complacency. This is the talk of the national water cooler. People are saying this. I personally have had a lot of experience with people saying, oh, China's just surging ahead, everyone's very impressed with how much economic progress they're making, and people are just kind of like, well, what's happened to us? In the course of his research for this book, Friedman had an experience with a younger girl who was in a middle school competition for designing the city of the future, or something very similar to that effect. And she said basically that China had more willpower and more enthusiasm to do these big projects. And so that really stuck with Friedman, because how is it that our youth have this idea that Americans are now complacent and China is the one that is surging ahead, and that they will have the bright and prosperous future, and they will be the ones doing all of these big, big projects. There is another incident that Friedman cites in this first chapter where the NFL postponed a game because the weather conditions were so bad that fans driving to the games would have been put in danger because of the icy conditions of the road. A sports commentator said that this just displays the fact that we're a nation of wusses. He said that if this had happened in China, not only would they not have canceled the game, but the Chinese would have walked through the snow for miles and doing calculus along the way just to get to this game. And so not only do we lack this will and ambition that used to drive the American spirit and our progress, but we've just come to accept a lot of problems. Going back to the escalators, since they had been in such a state of disrepair for the better part of a year, people had just gotten used to it. And it's just something that has really struck with Friedman, that there are so many problems in America that we're just accepting, and we're not refusing to fix, and it's part of a big problem. And so Friedman calls himself a frustrated optimist. He's an optimist because America has this great history of success. Since the inception of our country, we've been succeeding. We've had a lot of problems, that's for granted, but we've been succeeding and driving to become a major industrial and economic power of the world. And so we have this great history of success. We have a menagerie of people here in the country that have all of the skills and viewpoints to move this country forward to continue being successful. And we have a flexible enough economy that if somebody has a good enough idea, they can somehow find the money to get that idea in motion and put it into action. But Friedman calls himself a frustrated optimist because even though we have all this great potential, that there's a real just lack of things being done. There hasn't been a big collective effort, a big everyone working together toward the same project, he feels, since we've put a man on the moon. There hasn't been anything monumental, something great that America's done in such a long time that people have forgotten what it feels like to do something together and do something great. And so he thinks that our ability to succeed in the future can't just be based on the fact that we have all this great potential and this great history, but we have to have the willpower to do it. So he notes that so going back to the name of this chapter is If You See Something, Say Something. So Friedman has said that we've grown complacent. He's seen the fact that America is slowly falling behind, and he notes that it's important to note that it's slow decline. If America had started to plummet, then people would have taken action and we would have hopped back and gotten right back on track. But the problem is that we're very slowly declining, and so people are just letting this happen right past them. And so he calls that there are four reasons for this slow decline. Something called OODA, which is an Air Force term meaning observe, orient, decide, and act. He says that we've lost this ability. Our leaders are also, he also says that we're failing to address our biggest problems, which are education, energy, the economy, and climate change. America has been ignoring these problems, and they're only recently starting to make a real effort to try and address these problems. We've turned our back on our traditional formula of success, which is not a specific industry or not a specific path to success, how in the past it was automobile industry, but it's the ideas behind it, ability to think differently and to push forward and to use ingenuity and economy to push our ideas out into the world. And we have this great political stagnation where we've got two very different viewpoints and they're just fighting and we're not going anywhere. And so action has to be taken now to stop the slow decline and get us moving forward. So going back to China, Friedman says that as we try and get ourselves back on track, that even though we see China as this great example of how a country can advance itself, that we shouldn't be like China. We need to be like ourselves. At the moment, China is succeeding because they get more political bang for their buck. Our political system is great because everyone has a voice and we can do a lot, but at the moment we're locked in the stagnation, so we're not going anywhere. The amount of time it takes for anything to come out of Washington and affect change is too slow. And so China, even though that their system is not ideal, people don't have as much of a voice, they're able to do things quickly because it's just one voice and they get to go in and out and boom, things are happening. And so ideally, China would have to loosen up their system, and that we need to tighten up our system because we're just letting things just spin in the mud and we're not gaining any traction. So we have to focus on our best traits. And so we have to think about the long term. People, especially politicians now, have this great idea of thinking in the short term. They want to see an immediate return. They want to see themselves reelected, and that's part of the problem, part of this political stagnation. We need to constantly be thinking in terms of the long term. We need to accept the fact that no change will be immediate and that progress will take time and that it's going to cost a lot to get that progress started now. And so we need to take a look at China and use it as a mirror for ourselves. Because he noted that this national water cooler talk about American complacency and about how great China is, it's not really that we're talking about China. We're talking about ourselves. We're talking about how we've fallen behind and we've stopped acting the way that we used to when we've stopped being the leaders that we are. And so he's saying that he sees all of this, and so now is the time for action. He's using these great examples, these great visualizations, easy to understand examples about how we need to move forward. And so, both the problem and the solution is that we do not need to be like China. China isn't the problem is ourselves, and China isn't the solution. The solution is for us to go back to thinking the way that we did and to use the same ideas that we used back in the day to push our new ideas forward and to get America moving forward in a positive direction that will lead the world once again. Our problem is that we need to do something together. We need to bring ourselves together and do something great again, like putting a man on the moon. We need to get past this gridlock of Republicans versus Democrats, liberals versus conservatives, and we need to just start fixing the country. And we need to get back to these American core values that anything is possible, it just takes a little bit of willpower and a can-do attitude to do it. And so we just need to bring it back to where we once were, and that's what he's saying. Thank you.